So I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Kylie James. So Kylie graduated from the Institute of Holistic Nutrition in Toronto in 2009 with first-class honors. She is the founder of Koru Nutrition, a company that specializes in providing nutrition services for individuals with brain injury, spinal cord injury, and other neurological disorders, as well as digestive issues, mental health, and weight loss or gain. In 2011, Kylie and a colleague wrote a book on nutrition called Eat Well, Live Well with Spinal Cord Injury and Other Neurological Conditions, a practical guide to help address secondary health complications and SCI through nutrition. So Kylie is here with us today to talk about how nutrition can positively impact depression and anxiety following traumatic brain injury. Welcome, Kylie. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thanks so much, Michelle. It's such a pleasure to be here. Just going to share the screen to put my PowerPoint up. It's not letting me do it, Michelle.
Oh, you should be able to do it now.
Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. So you guys can see that? Okay, so I'm really excited to be here today to talk about a topic which I think it's almost like the new pandemic, depression and anxiety. The reason being, like, the last year and a half with all our lockdowns and not being able to access resources and everything else, it's been a real big problem. And individuals with a traumatic brain injury are already at risk of depression and anxiety, and you throw on this pandemic on top of that, and then it's a real problem. So I'm really glad to be here today to talk about how nutrition can have a really positive effect on our mood. So with brain injury, just to throw out some stats there, 53% experience major depressive disorder in the first year of sustaining a moderate to severe brain injury, and 22% experienced depression during first 6 months following a concussion. So you throw a pandemic on top of that as well, and I'm sure those numbers are a lot higher. So obviously common interventions with anxiety and depression. So obviously psychological counseling, whether it be a social worker, psychologist, a psychotherapist, obviously taking medications, doing yoga, meditation, positive mindset, and even exercise. But really, do people explore the nutrition piece as an approach to prevent and manage depression and anxiety? And it is a real powerful tool, because we are what we eat and what we absorb. So our body is constantly breaking down the food that we eat and using those nutrients to help support brain chemistry and brain function. So basically 60% of our brain is made up of fat. So we're a bunch of fat kids. We need that good fat in our brain, but we also need other nutrients too. So just for example, we consume protein, and protein gets broken down into amino acids, and those amino acids get turned into neurotransmitters that help us to think, help us to feel calm, help us to feel motivated. And we need certain vitamins and minerals to help convert that amino acid into that neurotransmitter. So that's one reason why food is so important for brain chemistry. So research has shown that poor mental health is linked to poor diet. In fact, research shows that people who ate more unhealthy food were more likely to report psychological distress such as depression and anxiety compared with people who ate a healthy diet. So eating fried foods or foods that contain too much sugar, processed grains, so that's your white bread, your white pasta, your white rice, can all be linked to depression. So today I want to talk, there's so many things we can do for depression and anxiety with nutrition, but I wanted to come across with some unique approaches. So one is looking at the gut-brain connection, and the other is looking at inflammation as well. So we've probably all heard about our gut being our second brain, and that's because it has so many neurological connections that connect from our gut to our brain and vice versa. And having a healthy gut really supports healthy brain function. So if we have poor gut health, we can have poor brain function. And some examples of poor gut health can be inflammation in the gut, or even holes in our gut lining, which is called intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And another one is the pathogens in our gut. So they're bacteria, the yeast, the parasites. So if we have these issues going on, it can affect our behaviors, the way we act. It can affect our cognition, the way we think, and it can affect our emotions, how we feel. So it's really important when we have a focusing on brain health, we focus on gut health as well. But why is supporting gut health so important for someone with a brain injury? So following a brain injury, the brain becomes inflamed. But what is not obvious is that this actually leads to inflammation in the gut. And this actually occurs within hours following a brain injury. And this inflammation in the gut increases that intestinal permeability, or those holes in the gut. And that allows for undigested food particles, toxins, and bacteria to enter into our bloodstreams. And our body doesn't recognize that. So it creates this autoimmune response, and this triggers systemic inflammation. And this inflammation can keep the blood-brain barrier open and fuel more inflammation in the brain. So in the sense, following a brain injury, your brain and your gut are on fire with that inflammation. So I want to talk more about that gut lining, and it's sometimes referred to as intestinal mucosa. So we need a healthy gut lining because that's where we absorb all our nutrients into the body, and it helps with, obviously, these nutrients go up to our brain and help with brain function. But after a brain injury, these nutrients may not be absorbed as well, and also you're getting those bacteria and toxins getting in. So one study found that amongst adult brain injury survivors, 8 to 33% of individuals exhibit some kind of microbiome, which is the bacteria in the gut, or imbalances or gut imbalances. So just wanted to give you more like a visual of what this looks like. So here you've got these nice, healthy, tight junctions, and that's healthy cells that line our intestinal lining. But if you have like trauma, such as a brain injury, stress, food allergies, if you're on antibiotics, have blood sugar problems, this can cause those tight junctions to become wider and allow for those toxins, those undigested food particles to seep into the bloodstream. This creates an autoimmune response, creates inflammation, and then causes the blood-brain barrier to be breached. But this also causes problem with malabsorption and running the risk of nutrient deficiencies. And we need nutrients, especially for our brain. Our highest amount of vitamin C is actually in our brain because of its neuroprotective properties. So this is really important. So we talked about the inflammation, and now I want to talk about this bacteria in the gut. So we have trillions of bacteria in our gut. In fact, we have 10 times more bacteria in our body than we do human cells. So, and we have also about over 1,000 different species of bacteria. So we have this massive ecosystem going on in our bodies. And this bacteria varies from person to person based on age, the food that we eat, our behaviors, the environment, and our genetics. And we talk about like the gut microbiome. This also includes other pathogens such as yeast and parasites as well. Now, we do want good bacteria in our gut, and usually it's 80% good, 20% bad is usually sort of the rule of thumb. But if we get too much of that bad bacteria and those yeast and those parasites, that can cause inflammation. It can cause problems with digestion. And this bacteria can release myotoxins that travel up into the brain and affect our brain chemistry and affect our mood. Interesting enough, our gut microbiome might be responsible for us becoming obese or overweight. And what's also really interesting, it's responsible for causing imbalance to neurotransmitters. So it might be caused things like tics, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, and aggression. So our gut microbiome, there's so much research now on our gut microbiome and how it has a profound impact on our health in so many different areas. But what they're finding is that the gut microbiome has a huge role with regards to neurological conditions. So kids on the spectrum that have autism, there is a lot of research showing that a lot of these kids have maybe yeast infections or actually have a plethora of bad bacteria in the gut. Their gut microbiome is off. Chronic pain, stress, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and depression and anxiety. But what I think is really interesting is our gut microbiome can actually influence our response to medications. It can determine whether a medication is effective or not, or whether you have side effects from that medication. So say you're on an antidepressant and then you're feeling, yep, this antidepressant's working, it's good. But someone on that same medication may not get the benefit of it and might have all these side effects. And that difference can be a result of their gut microbiome. So I thought that was like really interesting. So what can we do? So this was all sort of technical, but the simple thing you can do is eat lots of fruits and vegetables. So our healthy, good bacteria loves fiber. So we want to feed our bacteria with that fiber. So one study found that the variety in the gut microbiome, so we talked about that there's 1,000 different species, was based on the variety of the fruits and vegetables that a person eats. So the more variety that you eat, the more you get of all those different good species in our gut. The research also showed that the microbial composition of the gut can be rapidly altered with dietary changes. So if you go away today and start eating a lot more fruit and vegetables, quite quickly you're going to have a change in that gut microbiome. So MacDonald and his researchers said that this evidence would lead one to believe that more targeted diet changes could be a promising therapeutic avenue for conditions such as brain injury that could potentially alter the gut microbiome. The other really good thing about fiber and feeding that good gut bacteria is that it can have a positive effect on GABA levels in our brain. So GABA is a neurotransmitter that is involved in regulating anxiety, depression, sleep, and relaxation. So by the fact that you're eating more fruits and vegetables, getting more fiber, feeding that good bacteria, you're helping with that GABA neurotransmitter to help boost your mood and reduce anxiety. And a recent study found that just eating 4 extra portions of fruit and vegetables could boost people's mental health. They also found that the more fruit and vegetables people ate, the less likely they were to be diagnosed with a mental illness. I mean, the other really important thing about eating fruits and vegetables is all the antioxidants, all the bright colors. So carrots have got beta carotene in it, great antioxidant. Berries have anthocyanins. So all these antioxidants have a huge benefit to our brain to protect it from that free radical damage caused from the brain injury. So other recommendations for a healthy gut is avoiding sugar. Bad bacteria loves sugar. So the more sugar you eat, the more you feed that bad bacteria in your gut. And it's tough, right? Because sugar's hidden in everything. I mean, if you look at your ketchup bottle at home, ingredients are always listed from the most to the least. So some ketchup bottles have water, then sugar, then tomatoes. So there's more sugar than tomatoes in your ketchup bottle. So you want to try and reduce your sugar as much as possible. Take a probiotic supplement. So you want to look at taking one that has about 10 billion cultures and that has a variety of different species. And if you don't want to pop another pill because you're already on a lot of medications, eat fermented foods. So sauerkraut actually has trillions of bacteria in it. So having that as a part of your side dish with your chicken and a sandwich, as a side with your omelette, a great way to get those good bacteria in. Kombucha is like a fizzy drink that has those fermented bacteria in there. Kimchi, kefir, which is a fermented yogurt, miso, and plain yogurt. And the reason why I say plain, because when you start getting the fruit flavored yogurts, it's loaded with sugar. So just get the plain yogurt and add those fresh berries in to get your quota of fruits and vegetables and fiber. So again, eating a variety of those bright colored fruits and vegetables. So let's have a look at inflammation. So with brain injury, this actually results in chronic neuroinflammation. And what the research tells us is that inflammation may contribute to depression. And I see this a lot when I'm reading articles and research. Depression really has an underlying inflammatory component to it. So given that chronic low-grade inflammation can persist for years after a brain injury, this actually could be linked to higher rates of depression following a brain injury. So even though you may be struggling with changes in your life and ability to do the things that you could do before, that's going to cause some stress and cause depression, anxiety. But definitely there's some brain chemistry things going on that can also contribute to that. So cytokines are chemical messages that regulate inflammation in our body. And we actually need inflammation. So if you hurt your knee, you fall over, you're going to get like redness, swelling, inflammation, pain. I mean, that inflammation is good because it's helping to heal that injury. But if the inflammation remains over long term and becomes chronic, that's when it becomes an issue. So there's actually research shows there's an increase of those cytokines similar to those seen in depression following a brain injury. Now, the great thing is cytokines are heavily influenced by diet, so you can do a lot to control that inflammation. So consuming certain foods and avoiding others can really help to get those cytokine levels under control. And example of foods that fuel the cytokines are the ones we're looking at: the donuts, the processed foods, the chips, and the hamburgers and fries. So my colleague Joanne Smith and I, we were actually part of a research study at Brock University. Now, it wasn't with brain injury, it was with spinal cord injury, but individuals with an SCI also have chronic neuroinflammation. So what the study looked at is how diet can impact cytokine levels in the blood and how this in turn can impact depression, sleep, and pain levels. So these participants were put on an anti-inflammatory diet for 3 months. So the type of anti-inflammatory diet was no dairy, no gluten, no processed foods, refined grains, or sugars. They were also put on some supplements, so antioxidants, curcumin, which is very anti-inflammatory, and that's the active component found in turmeric. So there's also research about turmeric with concussion as well. Fish oils, I put everyone on a fish oil, very anti-inflammatory, very good for brain health, mood, and memory. And they were put on a vegetarian protein powder. So after 3 months of being on this anti-inflammatory diet, there was a reduction in cytokine levels in the blood by 28%. And this is a really exciting thing. Depression scores reduced by 55% in 3 months compared to 48% in SSRIs, the antidepressants. So it was more effective than antidepressants, and the depression scores reduced in half the time that SSRIs would take effect. Pain scores also significantly reduced by 39%, and sleep significantly improved as well. And we all know sleep is so important for healing, recovery, repairing, etc. There were other benefits noted but not recorded, such as weight loss, better skin health. So this is huge. So when we look at what the anti-inflammatory diet looks like, we're looking at, again, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, raw nuts and seeds, because you want to preserve those good fats. The organic omega-3 eggs. So you want to make sure you have the yolk, because the yolk has a chemical in it called choline, which is a precursor to acetylcholine that helps with memory. So really important to keep those yolks in there as well. You've got your herbs, turmeric, ginger, garlic, seasoning your food with spices and herbs as opposed to those sugar-loaded sauces that have lots of preservatives and additives in. Drinking your green tea is great. Green tea has a little bit of caffeine to give you that kick, but it also has an amino acid in it called L-theanine, which has a calming effect. And yes, you can have your dark chocolate, over 75% is great, and a little bit of red wine in moderation. So, and again, a lot of those good fats: olive oil, coconut oil, grass-fed butter. And staying away from grains, refined grains, whole grains, grain-fed meats, deep fried foods, and all those commercial salad dressings and trans fat. Now, this may be a bit overwhelming, so you're probably thinking, okay, where can I start? Because this is like too much for me to change in my diet. So what I would say is start from the beginning and start with breakfast. A lot of the breakfasts, the typical Western standard American diet, is some sort of like toast or refined cereal. So I definitely say trying to switch those out. And this is what I always start with my brain injured clients, is let's start working on some protein shakes. Protein shakes are great because it's a vehicle to hide fruits and vegetables in there. I had one client, I said, right, let's start putting spinach in there. He's like, there's no way I'm going to eat that green crap. I said, just try it. You won't notice it. So he asked his mum, can you start putting spinach in my smoothie? And she said, I've been putting spinach in your smoothie for the last month and you haven't noticed. So there's so many creative ways that you can, if you don't like fruits and vegetables, that you can get creative. Putting avocado in there, I guess your berries too. And this is great if you have a busy life and you have to get on the road to your various appointments, you can just take your smoothie with you. Chia pudding is great because you can make a big batch and keep them in the fridge, and it's a quick grab and go, loaded with those good fats and fiber, so good for brain health and good for feeding that bacteria in the gut. Omelets with vegetables, steel cut oats with cinnamon, which is really good for blood sugar balance. I mean, that's another really big thing for managing depression and anxiety too, is balancing blood sugars. So having a breakfast that's more higher in protein and fats and those complex carbs is really good. And you don't have to have a typical breakfast. Maybe you heat up soup or do a bone broth. If you're someone that is not hungry in the morning, especially if you have to take some medications with food, maybe you opt for soup or bone broth, or do a smoked salmon with avocado. Again, tons of those good fats, B vitamins, so a great way to start your day. So just in summary, eat a variety and lots of bright colored fruits and vegetables. Take a good quality probiotic and incorporate those fermented foods into your diet. The kimchi, miso soup, the kefir, the sauerkraut, the yogurt. Avoid the processed, fried, and packaged foods. And where possible, try and avoid the sugar. You may want to look at exploring the anti-inflammatory diet, but if you're someone that was like, you know what, I'm going to really struggle giving up dairy or gluten, maybe you focus on more Mediterranean diet, which does focus on whole grains, but has feta cheese and tzatziki and yogurt in it as well. There's a ton of research on the Mediterranean diet, so very good for supporting brain health. But just make one simple change at a time. I find it's just so much more effective. Make that one change, consolidate that so that becomes a habit, and then go on to the next change. And then you'll find the success with that. So that's the end of my presentation. So yeah, open to questions.
Thanks so much, Kylie. I thought it was fascinating, and I'm definitely going grocery shopping tonight. So we've got a few questions. First of all, how do we know what the state of our gut health is? It's, you maybe can't tell by looking at yourself, or how do we know how bad we're doing in terms of our gut health?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. I mean, the proper way is to actually do a stool analysis, but I never do that with my clients. But what you can do is look at, do you have problems with constipation, with diarrhea? Do you have gut pain? It's looking at those sort of symptoms of the gut, but you don't really know the state of your microbiome. If you have like yeast infection, you know that, okay, there's something else going in there, or other kinds of infections as well, but you really don't know the health of your gut unless you do a stool analysis.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a question here. I'd love to know about your recommendations for vitamins. I've previously been recommended B2, magnesium in high doses, but would love to know if there's others that you might recommend.
I put everyone on a fish oil, omega-3, because it's anti-inflammatory. It helps with memory and mood, and just people aren't getting that good omega-3 into their diet. I tend to put everyone on a probiotic. If you're recommended B2, I say take that in conjunction with a B complex, because Bs like to get absorbed together. So they hold hands and all get absorbed together. Minerals tend to compete for absorption. So I would definitely look at a B complex, and research shows that the B vitamins actually reduce the risk of brain shrinkage as well. So, and they're great for energy. Magnesium bisglycinate is the magnesium you want to be looking at, because that's the one that calms the nerves, helps with stress, relaxation. You want to stay away with magnesium citrate unless you're constipated and want to get the bowels moving. Magnesium citrate is the one for that, but definitely the fish oils, the B complex. I definitely would be focusing on more the fruits and vegetables, because there's so many other phytonutrients going on, and research shows that the food source is a much better absorbable way to get those nutrients in there. But yeah, those would be my top ones.
Okay, so I guess this is just a follow-up. You talked about probiotics. Should you take a probiotic supplement or just implement in your diet?
Either or. So it depends. Like if you take a probiotic, take it with food. But if you're doing like sauerkraut has trillions of bacteria. So if you don't want to be popping pills or you want to save some money, I would focus on the food first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whole grains, so confused, whole grains not recommended. And where do beans, so then there's a second part, where do beans, legumes fit in?
Beans and legumes are great. I love them because they're so cost effective and cheap. They're really high on and antioxidants as well. So really good for brain health, high in fiber, protein. So definitely recommend that. It's awesome. Grains, yes. So I think it's a case by case basis. So like I said, when people have a brain injury and that gut becomes inflamed and you have intestinal permeability, you're actually more at risk of food allergies. So what we tend to do with people is I recommend going on the food elimination diet. So you take out gluten and dairy for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you reintroduce one back in. So reintroduce dairy or reintroduce gluten and just monitor your symptoms. So when I first started nutrition school, I did this and I didn't realize I had a gluten or dairy problem until I did this. So my brain fog was lifted. I didn't even know I had brain fog. My bowels were better. My sleep was better. I had more mental focus. And then when I reintroduced them back in, I definitely noticed those symptoms started to appear. So I would say do that first. If you don't notice a problem, then you can definitely incorporate those whole grains back into your diet. So, and it's probably better to do that than go and do an expensive food allergy test.
Okay. So do non-dairy yogurt have the same benefits? So coconut yogurt, as the dairy yogurt?
I think it all depends on what other things are in there, because they can be loaded with sugar and additives and preservatives. And again, like we do a lot of coconut yogurt. We do coconut kefir at home. So it definitely has benefits. Just they might be slightly different benefits because there'll be different nutrient profiles in there.
Okay. So you mentioned my magnesium citrate to help not to take it unless you're constipated. Does it not help with migraines?
It may do, but I would think you'd be having better luck with magnesium bisglycinate with the migraines. So I would assume I have a couple of clients that they take, like, it's called Neuromag, and they have had such huge improvements with it. So yeah, I'd say the bisglycinate is better for the migraines.
Okay. Yeah. Would you be willing to share your slides can we post it with the presentation after?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, not a problem. I know there was a lot of information. So it's like, oh, I hope you do that. So yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Because I know I was furiously writing down what I should be eating, and so I'm assuming everyone else is. So, so we've got a question. I have inflammation and leaky gut and have loose stools. We'll try that. She'll try the diets reference in the 3-month study, but any other recommendations for 1 to 2 things that would be optimal additions to get gut calm and healing right away?
So you really want to take out those foods that are causing the gut to have the holes, right? So you want to take out those food intolerance, food allergies. So again, the gluten, dairy, do the anti-inflammatory diet. And to heal the gut, I would definitely recommend supplementing with the amino acid L-glutamine. It's very good for tissue healing, wound healing. Drink lots of cabbage juice because that's very good. That's got a ton of L-glutamine in it. Zinc is very good for tissue healing as well. So I would look at a zinc supplement, the fish oils, and you may want to look at some herbs that can be very soothing, such as marshmallow root, not the marshmallow candy, because that can be very soothing as well. Same as licorice, not the candy, the licorice herb. So those would be the big ones, but definitely L-glutamine, zinc, and fish oils to help with that gut healing.
Okay. So perhaps, I guess, where someone asked for spelling the first item, but maybe we can work with you to create a list of some of these supplements and what the benefit can be, because I know that there's so many, and that it's a lot to remember in one session.
It's so overwhelming, but I find when I work with my brain injury clients, like everyone's an individual, right? There is the mainstream core, but it's looking at all their different symptoms and also their diet too, because I have some clients that come to me that are already eating quite healthy, but we do need to change some things up, or they're eating terribly. And so we really need to be doing supplements to sort of help offset, and because people make we're always encouraging small changes over time to make it realistic and sustainable, right? So we're just meeting people where they're at, but I can definitely look at putting something together.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
It's, and a lot of them have long names that are hard to write down in one thing. So one thing you mentioned was about avoid sugar. What about natural sugars like honey or agave? Because sometimes, we need that sweet, that sweet kick to our treats. So what about those?
So I actually prefer the alcohol sugars. So monk fruit, stevia, what's the other one? Just swerve. Those are great because they don't spike blood sugars like the honey and the agave and stuff like that. Honey, I definitely would recommend because it's loaded in B vitamins, excuse the B pun, and it has like antimicrobial benefits too. So definitely good for gut health. So I would, and maple syrup, but the good quality maple syrup, right? Not the Aunt Jemima's. So that's okay, but I would definitely focus on the alcohol sugars. If you're balancing blood sugars, you'll find those cravings will not be there as much because you're not having that blood sugar drop where it's like, okay, I need something sweet to give my blood sugars back up there. And again, blood sugar balance is really important because when your blood sugars drop, your body naturally produces that stress hormone cortisol to raise your blood sugars up. And cortisol interferes with neurotransmitters. It's responsible for that nice tire around our waist. And a lot of us are already stressed out. So it's just adding to that stress because you're adding more of that stress hormone cortisol. So balancing those blood sugars is huge. So you won't have those cravings so much, eating more fat and protein and fiber, but even doing more fun things like raw energy balls or making trail mix with some stevia sweetened chocolate chips. That's another great one because you can just have them in your car. You can just pick at them. So those are some strategies to sort of help with that sweet taste. Yeah.
Okay. And what about nightshades like peppers, green, red peppers? What about, because they can cause inflammation. So someone who's recovering from a brain injury, are those foods that should be avoided?
That is a great question, actually. I focus on removing the nightshades if someone has chronic pain. Nightshades have a chemical in it called solanine, which is a natural pesticide, which is not sometimes people doesn't do well with their joints. I don't tend to take them out for brain injury unless there's a lot of sort of joint pain going on. But usually another thing too with food allergies, it's usually what people crave is the problem. So I had an Italian lady and she had the little Italian garden with, growing tons of tomatoes and eggplants, like all the nightshades, right? But she was addicted to tomatoes. And I said, I think you might have a problem with tomatoes. I think that because it can create an opioid-like response in the brain. She's like, oh, I'll give up the coffee, but not the tomatoes. And so we worked on some other stuff. And then finally she gave up the tomatoes and she noticed such a difference with her pain levels. So I focus on the nightshades more for pain, but not so much brain injury because they do have a lot of great nutrients in them.
Okay. So we just have time for one quick question. Eating healthy can be expensive. A lot of these items you're talking about cost more, but even the head of cauliflower can be $5-6. How can a healthy diet be done on a budget?
Yeah, sure. So the legumes that I talked about before is great. The legumes, the lentils, really nutrient dense. We do batch cooking with our clients. So like doing soups and stews because soups can really, a lot of it's water and we need water because if we're dehydrated, it can affect our memory and cognitive functioning as well. So doing soups and stews can really spread out the budget. You can look at incorporating intermittent fasting as well. There's lots of research out there about intermittent fasting with brain health. You just need to make sure if you are going to do that for breakfast, it's not, if you have to take medications with food, you have to work with your doctor around that. But then there's no mess, you're not buying food for breakfast. So the intermittent fasting might be a great option as well. And that can help boost mood as well and really good for weight loss. And then shopping, what would be another one? So definitely intermittent fasting, the legumes, lentils, and maybe just, trying not to go organic because people can't afford organic. If you are, just focus on the dirty dozen, like the key fruits and vegetables that are really highly sprayed. So that's things like your apples and your pears and things like that. So they would be some go-to strategies as well.
Okay. Well, I mean, I feel like we could do another 2 hours on this topic with you. It's a lot too, but we are out of time. So thank you so much for being here today. We sincerely appreciate your expertise and knowledge, and look forward to putting your presentation up and any other supplemental materials you can include with that.
Yeah, that would be great. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present at your conference. I think it's awesome.
Anytime. So everyone else, we've got a break now. So I encourage you to get up, move around, take a break from your screen. So there's no need to log off. You can just, leave it running. My colleague Rachel will be back at 12:50 Eastern for our next schedule of speakers. So take some time and walk around. Thanks very much.